Love has a mysterious way of connecting souls that seem destined to remain apart. But sometimes, it defies the rules, challenging the boundaries of what society deems acceptable. Today, we'll dive into a deeply emotional story about the forbidden bond between a stepmother and her stepson, a journey that moves from distance to understanding, breaking through initial barriers to form a connection unlike any other. This is a tale of love, sacrifice, and the forbidden emotions that linger in the shadows of the human heart. Before we delve into this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to ensure you never miss another meaningful tale. And now, let's begin. I'm Sophia, a 38-old woman whose life recently took a turn I never saw coming. As a stepmother, I've always prided myself on nurturing relationships built on care, patience, and understanding. Yet, even with the best intentions, there are times when life unravels in ways that defy logic and challenge your deepest values. My husband, Luke, is a successful entrepreneur. And while I've always admired his ambition and tenacity, his career has slowly, inexorably pulled him away from the fabric of our life together. Luke's days are consumed by an endless carousel of meetings, phone calls, and late-night emails. His drive for success, though commendable, has left little room for us. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that his sacrifices were for the greater good of our family. But as weeks turned into months, the emotional distance between us became an aching void I couldn't ignore. The once vibrant connection that defined our early years had faded into a dull routine, marked by polite exchanges and fleeting moments of intimacy. Nights were the hardest. Our king-sized bed, once a sanctuary of warmth and affection, felt cavernous and cold. I would lie awake, listening to the silence of our home, my heart heavy with longing for the Luke I used to know, the man who couldn't wait to come home to me, who saw me, truly saw me. My attempts to bridge the gap, planned dinners, heartfelt conversations, were often met with distracted nods or hurried promises to talk later. Slowly, resentment crept in, uninvited but persistent, like a shadow I couldn't shake. It was during one of these restless nights that I began to notice Logan differently. My stepson, now 24, had recently moved back home after finishing college. Logan had always been respectful and kind, qualities I deeply appreciated in him. But as days turned into weeks, I couldn't ignore the undeniable transformation in him. He had grown into a self-assured, strikingly handsome young man, his confidence radiating in every movement. At first, I dismissed the flicker of awareness I felt around him. Surely, it was just my loneliness playing tricks on me. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more undeniable it became. I found myself stealing glances at him, caught off guard by the way his presence seemed to fill the room. His laughter, his casual charm, it all drew me in. A stark contrast to the cold, quiet absence I felt with Luke. There were moments when our eyes would meet, and an unspoken tension would ripple between us. Fleeting but potent. I chastised myself for feeling this way, for allowing these emotions to take root. But the truth was, they had already begun to bloom, wild and uncontrollable. One particularly lonely afternoon, I decided to do something for myself, a small act of reclaiming the woman I felt I'd lost. I slipped into a silk robe, letting its softness caress my skin. A bittersweet reminder of days when I felt beautiful and desired. As I stood before the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. Where had she gone? The vibrant, confident Sophia who once knew her worth. I sighed, the weight of longing pressing against my chest like an old, familiar ache. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't hear the front door open until it was too late. I turned to see Logan standing in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the fading light. His presence was electrifying, his gaze steady yet unreadable. "Hey, Sophia," he greeted, his voice smooth, carrying a warmth that sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes lingered on me, their intensity igniting something deep within. My pulse quickened, and I felt the color rise to my cheeks as I fumbled to adjust my robe. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his tone laced with a hesitance that matched the storm of emotions swirling within me. The air between us was heavy, thick with unspoken words and the unrelenting pull of something neither of us dared to name. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the space between us charged with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. "No, it's fine," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. I forced a smile, trying to break the spell, but the warmth in my cheeks betrayed me. "I was just thinking." The words felt hollow, a feeble attempt to mask the storm brewing beneath the surface. Yet, Logan didn't move, his gaze unwavering, as if he were searching for something in my eyes, something I wasn't sure I could give. As the silence stretched on, I felt a pang of guilt mingled with an undeniable thrill. What was I doing? This was wrong, wasn't it? But the longing that had taken root in my heart refused to be silenced. It whispered to me, tempting me with the promise of connection, of being seen, of feeling alive again. "I should go," Logan said finally, his voice soft but tinged with uncertainty. Yet, as he stepped back toward the door, I found myself speaking before I could think. "Wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My hand reached out instinctively, stopping him in his tracks. "You don't have to leave. We can talk." The words hung in the air, a fragile bridge between us. My heart pounded as I watched him pause, his expression conflicted, his resolve wavering. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice lower now, filled with a vulnerability that mirrored my own. And in that moment, I knew we were standing at the edge of something irrevocable, a precipice where one step could change everything. The question wasn't whether I wanted to step forward, it was whether I dared to. I nodded, my heart pounding so fiercely it seemed to echo in my ears, drowning out everything else. I didn't fully understand what I was doing or what I even wanted. But in that fleeting moment, none of it seemed to matter. The ache of loneliness, the craving for connection, had eroded every wall I had built around myself. I was willing, no, desperate, to embrace whatever this was, no matter how uncertain or uncharted it felt. My body moved as if it were no longer my own, drawn toward him with a force that defied logic. As the space between us vanished, the air grew heavier, charged with a forbidden tension that was almost tangible. It was as though an invisible thread had wound its way around us, pulling us closer, tighter, until escape was no longer an option. "Wait," I whispered, my voice so soft it was barely audible over the storm raging within me. "You don't have to go. Stay, let's talk." He stopped mid-step, the hesitation in his movement revealing the conflict etched across his face. My words had reached him, halting his retreat. and the air between us seemed to hum with the unspoken emotions we both struggled to contain. "Logan," I ventured again, the vulnerability in my voice more pronounced now. "I don't know how else to say this, but I've been feeling lost. Isolated. Caleb's absence has been harder than I imagined. And there's this space between us, this silence that feels so much louder than it should. I've been wishing, hoping, that we could connect in a way we haven't before." My confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded, like a fragile offering extended with trembling hands. For a moment, he said nothing, and I braced myself for rejection, for the possibility that I had misread everything. Finally, he spoke, his tone quieter, reflective. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice tinged with a sadness that mirrored my own. "It's been strange, hasn't it? Like he's drifting further away. And everything feels off because of it." Encouraged by his honesty, I pressed on, emboldened by the flicker of understanding in his words. "What if?" I said, the words tentative but filled with a clarity I hadn't expected. "What if we spent time together? Just us. No distractions. No interruptions. Maybe that's what we need." The stillness that followed was almost deafening, and I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. To my surprise, his lips curved into a slow, almost reluctant smile, a smile that seemed to bloom despite the tension in the room. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a spark of warmth through the cold emptiness I had been carrying. Without thinking, I moved closer, my heart racing as the distance between us dissolved. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the sheer proximity sending a jolt of electricity through me. "I can feel it," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "This connection, this energy between us, it's undeniable. Logan, I need to tell you something. I've thought about you. More than I should. More than I ever intended to." The words spilled out before I could second-guess them, each one carving a deeper path into the vulnerability I had exposed. My chest tightened as I waited for his response, half expecting him to recoil, to dismiss my feelings as misplaced or inappropriate. But he didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence filling the space around me until there was nothing but him, his warmth, his scent, the steady rhythm of his breath. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. "This is insane," he murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. His hand hovered uncertainly in the space between us before finally resting on my waist, his touch igniting a fire that spread through me like wildfire. I leaned in, my lips brushing his in a kiss that started hesitantly, tentatively, but quickly deepened into something more. It was a kiss that spoke of every unsaid word, every unspoken desire, as if we were trying to make up for all the time we had spent holding back. His hands slid to my back, pulling me closer, and I felt the heat of his body press into mine. Every nerve in my body seemed to come alive under his touch, 1,000 electric currents sparking in unison. The kiss was both a question and an answer, an acknowledgement of the uncharted territory we were venturing into. When we finally pulled apart, our breaths came in short, uneven gasps. I looked up at him, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of emotions I could barely comprehend. "This is wrong," I whispered, the words trembling with the weight of what we had just done. His gaze held mine, his expression a mixture of defiance and longing. "I know," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "But it feels right. Doesn't it?" Before I could respond, his lips found mine again. This time with a fervor that left no room for doubt. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as if we were both trying to hold on to something fragile and fleeting. The kiss deepened, growing more urgent, more consuming, until the rest of the world seemed to fade away. His hands roamed over my back, leaving trails of fire in their wake. And I shivered at the intensity of it all. When we broke apart again, his eyes searched mine, the storm of emotions in his gaze mirroring my own. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of what we had just begun, something exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly impossible to ignore. "Are we really doing this?" I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Yet it seemed to echo loudly in the stillness of the room. The question hung between us like a fragile thread, taut with the weight of everything we had left unspoken. Every glance that lingered too long. Every moment we had resisted. My mind was a chaotic storm of thoughts, a flurry of doubt and longing. But my body, my heart, had betrayed me. They had already made the decision I was too afraid to voice aloud. "Yes," he said firmly, his voice steady, as though it held all the certainty I lacked. "I want this. Sophia. I've wanted you for longer than I care to admit. Longer than you could possibly imagine." His words, so raw and unfiltered, struck me like a bolt of lightning. They sent a shiver through my entire being, igniting something deep within me, a fire I had tried so hard to extinguish, to bury beneath layers of pretense and restraint. But now, here it was, blazing uncontrollably. His boldness was intoxicating, his honesty disarming. It stripped away my defenses, leaving me exposed to the undeniable truth that I had wanted this too. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly alive. A courage I didn't know I possessed surged through me, sweeping away the hesitation and fear that had held me back for so long. Slowly, deliberately, I took a step toward him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, without thinking, I reached for his hand, intertwining my fingers with his. The connection was electric, almost surreal, as though we had crossed an invisible line into uncharted territory. As I led him to the bed, my mind swirled with a potent mix of excitement and disbelief. Was this real? Were we actually doing this? The air around us seemed charged, heavy with anticipation, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Sitting side by side on the edge of the bed, the tension between us became almost unbearable. My gaze locked with his, and in that moment, words felt unnecessary. His eyes, dark with desire, said everything. When our lips met, the kiss was nothing short of incendiary. It wasn't tentative or restrained but full of passion. A raw, unspoken confession that neither of us could hold back any longer. His lips moved against mine with a hunger that mirrored my own, and I surrendered completely to the moment. His hands, warm and assured, roamed over my body, exploring every curve as if committing me to memory. Each touch ignited sparks that raced through me, leaving me breathless and trembling. "Don't hold back," I whispered, the words spilling from my lips before I could second-guess them. They surprised even me, but saying them felt liberating, like shedding a skin I had outgrown. His response was immediate and fervent. his lips claiming mine again. Deeper this time. More consuming. Every kiss, every caress, spoke of a longing that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. As I melted into him, my hands instinctively found their way to his chest. I could feel the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath my fingertips. And it only heightened the connection between us. My fingers traced the lines of his jaw, the faint stubble rough against my skin, grounding me in the reality of the moment. When I gently pushed him back onto the bed, a playful smile tugged at my lips, and I straddled him with a confidence I hadn't known I possessed. His eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and admiration flickering in their depths. "I never expected this," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, tinged with awe. The vulnerability in his words only emboldened me. I leaned down, capturing his lips once more, and let myself get lost in the intoxicating rhythm of his kiss. The heat between us built steadily, a wildfire threatening to consume everything in its path. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to let it. But just as the moment threatened to engulf us entirely, reality came crashing back. The faint sound of the front door opening sent a jolt of panic through me. My body froze as adrenaline surged. "Kayla's home early," I whispered, my voice trembling. We scrambled, the spell of the moment broken but the intensity still thrumming through me. My heart pounded as Logan slipped into the closet, his movements swift and silent. I barely had time to smooth my clothes when I heard Caleb's cheerful voice echoing down the hallway. "Sophia, are you here?" he called, oblivious to the storm he had just interrupted. "I'm in the bedroom," I replied, my voice higher pitched than I intended. My nerves betrayed me, and I fought to compose myself as Caleb's footsteps approached. He entered the room moments later, his expression warm and relaxed. "I didn't expect you home so soon," he said casually, his gaze sweeping over the room as if searching for something, or someone. I forced a smile, willing my racing heart to calm. "Just taking it easy," I said, my tone carefully controlled. "How was your day?" As Caleb began to speak, his words barely registered. My thoughts were consumed by the man hidden just a few feet away, the memory of his touch still lingering on my skin. The room felt suffocating, charged with the weight of everything unsaid. I nodded along to Caleb's words, all the while battling the ache in my chest, the longing for Logan, the impossible tangle of guilt and desire that I couldn't seem to unravel. "It's good that you're taking a break," I said, my voice straining to sound casual. The tension in my chest hadn't eased, my heart still racing from the whirlwind of emotions that had erupted earlier. Caleb nodded, unaware of the storm raging inside me, his attention focused on recounting the mundane details of his day. We sat on the couch, his words flowing freely about work, errands, and plans for the coming weekend, topics that felt light years away from the turmoil consuming me. As I nodded along, feigning interest, my thoughts betrayed me, slipping back to the fire Logan had ignited within me. The memory of his touch lingered like an electric current under my skin, impossible to suppress. Caleb's voice faded into a distant hum, background noise that my mind refused to process. I wanted to ground myself in the moment, to be present with Caleb. But my heart was elsewhere, tethered to the intensity of what had transpired between Logan and me. A spark had been lit, dangerous, unrelenting, and wholly intoxicating. When Caleb left for another late-night meeting a few days later, the house felt cavernous in its silence. Each creak of the floorboards, each tick of the clock seemed amplified in the emptiness. I was left alone with my thoughts. And they were unrelenting. Logan's hands, his lips, his presence, they haunted me, consuming every inch of my consciousness. The sheer weight of the temptation was suffocating. And I felt like a moth drawn to the flame, knowing full well the risk but powerless to resist. Desperate to escape the mounting tension, I decided to draw a bath, hoping the warmth and solitude would soothe my frayed nerves. I lit candles, their soft glow casting flickering shadows across the walls. The steam from the water rose, curling around me like a gentle embrace as I sank into the tub. The heat was immediate, enveloping me, loosening the tension in my shoulders. And for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe I could find peace. I closed my eyes, focusing on the steady rhythm of my breathing, willing the chaos in my mind to dissipate. But peace was elusive, even in the tranquility of the bath. My thoughts circled back to Logan. His presence was seared into my memory. The way his touch had ignited something primal and uncontrollable within me. I could almost feel the heat of his hands against my skin, the pressure of his lips, the raw energy of our connection. It was maddening. This push and pull between what was forbidden and what I craved so desperately. The water lapped against my skin as I shifted, restless and overwhelmed. My body may have been relaxed, but my mind was a battlefield. Every attempt to silence the longing brought a fresh wave of memories, his mischievous grin, the depth of his gaze, the way he made me feel seen and alive. It was as if he had unlocked a part of me that I hadn't known existed. And now that it was open, I couldn't close it again. A soft knock at the door shattered the quiet, sending a jolt through me. My pulse quickened, my breath catching in my throat. Wrapping a towel around myself, I moved toward the door, a mix of apprehension and anticipation coursing through me. When I opened it, there he was, Logan, leaning against the doorway with that signature grin, his eyes sparkling with an intensity that made my knees weak. "I trust I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice low and smooth, laced with a playful edge that sent shivers down my spine. His presence was magnetic, an irresistible pull that left me breathless. "Not at all," I managed to reply, though my voice betrayed the flurry of emotions surging within me. My heart thundered in my chest as he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate ease. The air between us crackled with unspoken tension, a palpable energy that neither of us acknowledged aloud. "I was just bathing," I added, my words shaky, my composure slipping. The vulnerability of the moment, the proximity, the charged atmosphere, was almost too much to bear. Logan's eyes never left mine, dark and intense, as if he could see straight into the depths of my soul. "May I join you?" His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it resonated with a power that left no room for misunderstanding. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. And for a moment, time seemed to stand still. I hesitated, my mind racing, but my heart had already made its decision. I nodded, my breath shallow, the word escaping my lips before I could second-guess myself. "Yes." The tension broke like a dam, flooding the space between us with an urgency that was impossible to resist. Logan stepped closer, his movements deliberate, his gaze locked onto mine. The click of the door shutting behind him felt final, a point of no return. And my pulse quickened in response. As he began to undress, My eyes traced the lines of his body, each movement stirring something deep within me. His shirt fell away, revealing the sculpted contours of his chest. And I couldn't tear my gaze away. The warmth of the steam mingled with the heat radiating from him, creating a heady mix that left me dizzy with anticipation. When he slid into the tub beside me, the water rose, enveloping us both in a cocoon of intimacy. The proximity was electric, every brush of his skin against mine sending jolts of awareness through me. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of the moment settling around us. Our eyes met, and the air between us felt thick with possibility. And then, he leaned in, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was soft at first but quickly grew in intensity. The world around us blurred. The only thing that mattered was the connection we shared, the fire that burned brighter with every passing second. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I responded instinctively, my fingers threading through his hair as I deepened the kiss. The water splashed, the candles flickered, and the world outside faded away. All that existed was this moment, this undeniable, unrelenting passion that consumed us both. His smirk was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, but it left a spark in its wake. I responded with equal fervor, my voice trembling with both confidence and vulnerability. And you become even more irresistible every time I see you, I murmured, the words escaping in a breathless whisper, barely audible over the gentle ripple of the water around us. Something about his presence, his undeniable magnetism, emboldened me. With a surge of newfound courage, I leaned into him, my hands finding their way to his broad shoulders. I guided him back against the edge of the tub, feeling the tension in his muscles beneath my fingertips. The water swirled and sloshed gently, but the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, locked in a moment that transcended time and space. I straddled him, the heat of his body radiating through the thin barrier of water between us. My heart raced as I pressed closer, the sensation sending a thrilling shiver down my spine. Then, I kissed him again, this time deeper, slower, more deliberate. My hands roamed over his chest, fingertips grazing his smooth skin and pausing to feel the frantic beating of his heart beneath them. It mirrored my own, as if we were somehow sinking in a rhythm only we could hear. Logan's eyes widened briefly in surprise before a flicker of excitement lit up his gaze. Without hesitation, he returned my kiss, his lips melding with mine in a passionate dance that left me breathless. His hands, strong and sure, explored my body with a mixture of tenderness and hunger, igniting a fire that seemed to burn hotter with every touch. At that moment, nothing else existed. The world outside faded into insignificance, and the weight of the past, the uncertainty of the future, dissolved into the heat that enveloped us. It was as though an invisible force had drawn us together, forging a connection that felt primal and undeniable. The water lapped around us as I lost myself in him, surrendering to a tide of emotions that carried me further than I'd ever dared to go. My voice, low and filled with raw emotion, escaped in a whisper. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The truth in my words reverberated in the air between us, sealing a moment that felt both intimate and eternal. We moved closer, our bodies pressed together, the sensation of skin against skin setting off sparks that ignited into a roaring blaze. His lips found mine again, capturing them with an urgency that mirrored the intensity coursing through me. Each kiss, each touch, pulled us deeper into a whirlwind of desire and connection. The air around us grew thick with steam, and our breaths mingled as passion climbed to a fever pitch. Every sense was heightened, the faint scent of the bathwater, the warmth of his skin, the sound of our breathing quickening in unison. Time lost all meaning as we became immersed in the sheer pleasure of being together, exploring each other with abandon, tearing down every wall that had ever stood between us. As the water cooled, its once soothing warmth replaced by a gentle chill, we finally broke apart, our gazes locked, and for a moment, we simply existed in the stillness, breathless and flushed, our hearts pounding in unison. A heady sense of exhilaration coursed through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, as though a dormant part of me had been awakened. In his eyes, I saw a reflection of my own emotions, vulnerability, connection, and something deeper, something I dared not name. But then, the sound of the front door opening shattered our fragile bubble of intimacy. A jarring, mundane noise that reminded us both of the reality we'd momentarily escaped. My heart leapt into my throat as panic surged through me. "Luke's home," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and urgency. The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Logan's expression hardened, his movements swift and deliberate. "We have to get out of here," he said, his voice firm but quiet. His eyes darted toward the door, then back to me, a silent understanding passing between us. In a frenzy, we scrambled out of the tub, our actions frantic and uncoordinated. Water splashed onto the floor, and the sound of our hurried movements echoed through the room, amplifying the tension that gripped us. My hands trembled as I struggled to dress, my mind racing with 100 scenarios of what would happen if we were discovered. Downstairs, Luke's cheerful voice called out, shattering the silence. "Sophia, I'm back." His tone was light and casual, oblivious to the chaos unfolding above. "We need to hide," Logan whispered urgently, his eyes scanning the room for an escape. Without hesitation, we darted behind the curtain, our breaths shallow and quick as we pressed ourselves against the wall. Every second felt interminable, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. As we held our breath, hearts pounding in unison, the gravity of what had just transpired, and what we were risking, settled over me. Yet even amidst the chaos, a lingering ember of the connection we had just shared remained, burning brightly enough to outshine the panic. As we reach the end of this story, let it serve as a reminder that emotions, no matter how intense, are often fleeting. What feels overwhelming today may fade tomorrow, leaving room for clarity and growth. Sometimes, the heart may wander into forbidden territory, but it is our choices that define who we are and shape our future. Let us learn to channel our emotions wisely, prioritize what truly matters, and move forward with hope and purpose. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video to stay connected with more meaningful stories. See you in the next video.